Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel.
A betrayal in Port Charles, Ned's tragic downfall and Brook Lynn's shocking discovery. The quiet elegance of Bobby's restaurant was shattered in an instant when one of Port Charles' most prominent figures collapsed without warning. Ned Quartermaine, the respected head of the Quartermaine family and longtime fixture in the business world, fell victim to a sinister act of poisoning that would set off a chain reaction of shocking revelations and desperate family confrontations. What began as an ordinary evening would soon become the catalyst for one of the most dramatic weeks Port Charles has ever witnessed, a story of betrayal, loss, and the relentless search for justice. The collapse, a moment that changed everything. The evening started like any other at Bobby's. Ned had stopped by the restaurant for what should have been a routine visit, unaware that he was walking directly into danger. The food he would consume that night had been tampered with, a carefully planned act designed to eliminate a target. As Ned ate, the poison began to course through his veins, a slow-acting toxin that would soon transform a normal dinner into a medical emergency. Within moments of ingesting the contaminated meal, Ned felt something terribly wrong. His chest tightened, his breathing became shallow, and the room began to spin around him. Gripping the edge of a nearby chair as his vision blurred, Ned tried desperately to maintain his composure, but his body was betraying him. He collapsed to the floor with a sickening thud, his hands still grasping for stability that would never come. "Someone call an ambulance," a voice shouted across the restaurant. Within minutes, paramedics rushed through the doors, their professional efficiency a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding around them. Ned was barely conscious as they loaded him onto a stretcher, his face pale and contorted with pain. What was supposed to be another day in Port Charles had become a life-or-death situation, and no one yet understood why. The hospital vigil, families united by fear. General Hospital's emergency department erupted into controlled pandemonium as Ned was rushed through the doors. Doctors immediately began their assessment, running tests and stabilizing his condition. The initial diagnosis was terrifying poisoning. A rare neurotoxin had been introduced into his system, something engineered and deliberate, not accidental or coincidental. Word of Ned's collapse spread through Port Charles like wildfire. At the hospital, Olivia Quartermaine received the devastating call about her husband. Her face crumpled as she heard the words, her hand trembling as she gripped the phone. Before she knew it, she was rushing to the hospital, desperate to reach Ned's side. When Olivia arrived at General Hospital, she was met with the sight of her husband lying in a hospital bed, monitors beeping steadily around him, for lines running into his arms. She wasn't alone in her vigil. Lulu Spencer, ever loyal to the Quartermaines, stood beside her, offering quiet support and comforting words. Other family members gathered as news spread, each one facing the crushing reality that Ned, a man who had survived boardroom battles, family scandals, and decades of Port Charles chaos, was now fighting for his life against an invisible enemy. "He's strong," Lulu whispered to Olivia, though her words rang hollow against the beeping of machines and the urgent tones of medical staff moving past the room. "He's going to fight through this." But the doctor's prognosis was grim. Ned's condition continued to deteriorate. The toxin was progressing faster than anyone anticipated. Hours passed like days as his family kept vigil, speaking in hushed tones, offering prayers to a God who seemed distant and unmoved by their desperation. The final confession, truth at the brink of death. In the dimly lit hospital room, as monitors documented Ned's failing vital signs, one member of the family sat beside his bed. Brook Lynn Quartermaine, Ned's beloved daughter, held her father's hand as she watched the man who had raised her slipping away. The heart monitor's rhythm became increasingly irregular, each beep a reminder that their time together was running out. Through the haze of medication and pain, Ned's eyes focused on his daughter's face. With tremendous effort, gathering what little strength remained, he pulled her closer. His voice was barely a whisper, but his message was unmistakable. "Brook." It was Drew, Ned managed to say, each word seeming to cost him immeasurable effort. "Drew. He poisoned me. He did this." Brook Lynn's eyes widened in shock and horror. Drew Kane, her father's own nephew, the congressman who had become increasingly erratic and dangerous over the past months. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Despite the chaos and drama that had surrounded Drew in recent weeks, actually hearing her father accuse him of attempted murder was almost incomprehensible. "Dad, no? Are you sure?" Brook asked, tears streaming down her face, though in her heart, she already knew the answer. How would Ned know such a thing if he wasn't absolutely certain? In his final moments, with nothing left to gain and everything to lose, her father had given her the truth. Ned nodded weakly, his grip on her hand tightening slightly. It was his last clear act of communication, a final gift to his daughter, the name of the man who had orchestrated his death. As if on cue, the heart monitor's rhythm became erratic. Alarms began to sound. Medical staff rushed into the room, elbowing their way past Brooklyn as they attempted emergency measures. Chest compressions, medications, desperate efforts to bring Ned back from the brink. But it was too late. The poison had done its work. Ned Quartermain's eyes closed for the final time. The man who had wielded such influence in Port Charles' business world, who had maneuvered through decades of family crises, who had stood as a patriarch over generations of Quartermains, had been brought down not by corporate rivals or personal enemies, but by a nephew's calculated betrayal. At that moment, Brooklyn knew her world had changed forever. And she knew exactly what she had to do. A daughter's fury, Brooklyn's demand for justice. The hospital room fell silent except for the steady tone of the flatline. Doctors exchanged glances. There was nothing more they could do. Ned Quartermain was gone. Brooklyn stood frozen for a moment, her entire body trembling with a cocktail of emotions: grief, shock, anger, and a burning sense of injustice that seemed to ignite something primal within her. She pulled away from the nurses, stumbling backward out of the room, her mind racing. The confession, her father's final words, the accusation that hung in the air like smoke. Drew Kane had done this. Her own family member had poisoned her father and left him to die. But this wasn't something she could let slide or handle privately. This was murder. This was cold, calculated, premeditated murder. Within hours, Brooklyn found herself sitting across from Detective Dante Falconeri at Port Charles Police Department. Her hands were shaking as she detailed everything: the poisoning, Ned's collapse, his hospitalization, and most importantly, his dying words. "My father told me it was Drew," Brooklyn said, her voice trembling but resolute. "With his last breath, he told me that Drew Kane poisoned him. I need to file a report. I need justice for my father." Dante listened carefully, taking notes, his professional demeanor never wavering even as the implications of what Brooklyn was telling him became clear. A sitting congressman, a member of one of Port Charles' most prominent families, an accusation of murder based on a dying declaration. "Are you absolutely certain that's what he said?" Dante asked, though they both knew the answer. Why would Brooklyn come to the police with such a serious accusation if she wasn't certain of what her father had told her? "I'm certain," Brooklyn replied, her jaw clenched. "And now I'm reporting it officially. Drew Kane murdered my father." The report was filed. The wheels of justice, slow-moving though they might be, had begun to turn. News of Ned's death and the accusation against Drew spread through Port Charles like a shockwave. A sitting congressman accused of murdering his uncle. The scandal was almost too large to comprehend. The aftermath, a family in chaos. The Quartermain mansion, usually a beacon of wealth and stability, became a place of mourning and fury. Olivia sat in the study, her grief-stricken face a mask of quiet rage. She had lost her husband to betrayal, and the betrayal had come from within their own family circle. The man she had once seen as a promising young politician had revealed himself to be a cold-blooded murderer. Other family members gathered to discuss what came next. The evidence needed to be collected. Drew's movements would need to be documented. The timeline of events would need to be established. But the most damning evidence of all was Ned's dying declaration, his last words uttered in the presence of his daughter, naming his killer. At the Port Charles Police Department, Dante and his team were already moving on the case. They would interview witnesses from Bobby's. They would examine the food that had been served. They would trace the poison to its source. And they would build a case against Drew Kane that would be almost impossible to refute. For Drew himself, the walls were beginning to close in. What he may have believed would be an easily overlooked incident, the convenient removal of an inconvenient family member, had instead become a public scandal and a murder investigation. His position as a congressman, already under scrutiny for his various misdeeds and his attempts to manipulate situations to his advantage, now seemed utterly precarious. Brook, for her part, had transformed her grief into fuel for justice. She had reported every detail, answered every question, and provided the crucial deathbed accusation that had launched a murder investigation. In doing so, she had ensured that her father's death would not be swept under the rug or forgotten in the chaos of Port Charles' usual drama. The city was reeling. A poisoning. A death. A congressman accused of murder. A daughter's determination to see justice done. All of this had unfolded in the span of just a few harrowing days, and the full implications were still being understood. Ned Quartermain was gone, but the truth of his death would live on. And in the halls of the Port Charles Police Department, in the offices of prosecutors, and in the hearts of his family members, there was a grim determination that Drew Kane would answer for what he had done. The investigation had only just begun, and before it was over, Port Charles would be forever changed by the events that had transpired within its borders. Next, as tensions simmer beneath the surface of our favorite coastal town, few storylines capture the rage of personal vendettas clashing with world-altering stakes quite like Harley Corinthus's latest crusade. Right now, she's charging headlong into a revenge scheme that could unravel not just her family ties, but the fragile safeguards protecting the globe from catastrophe. Fueled by a deep sense of betrayal, Carly has aligned herself with an unlikely ally, blind to the dominoes she's toppling in the process. Carly's fury stems from a shocking revelation. Her ex-husband, Jack Brennan, secretly enlisted their daughter Jocelyn into the covert operations of the WSB without a whisper of consultation. This omission feels like a dagger to Carly, who has always prided herself on being the fierce guardian of her children's futures. In her mind, Jack's unilateral decision strips away her agency as a mother, reducing her to a bystander in Joss's high-stakes world of espionage. The sting is amplified by their shared history. Jack's charm once drew her in, but his deceptions have now painted him as the ultimate betrayer. Carly's response? A calculated alliance with Valentin Casadini, a man whose own tangled past with Jack makes him all too eager to fan the flames. Together, they're plotting moves designed to undermine Jack's authority and expose his vulnerabilities, from leaking sensitive intel to orchestrating subtle sabotages within WSB circles. Yet, in her righteous anger, Carly overlooks the broader canvas. Jack isn't just any operative dodging family drama. He's the linchpin holding back a tidal wave of destruction threatening to engulf Port Charles and beyond. This isn't mere soap opera intrigue, it's a powder keg rooted in the lingering echoes of the Brennan-Casadini rivalry. Valentin, ever the master manipulator with his aristocratic poise and shadowy connections, harbors grudges that date back to their days as unlikely partners in building shadowy empires. What began as a professional alliance soured into bitter enmity when personal ambitions clashed, leaving scars that neither has fully healed. Valentin knows the full weight of Jack's current mission, yet he dangles the bait of revenge before Carly, whispering promises of justice while steering her toward actions that could cripple global security. Picture Valentin in a dimly lit lounge, his eyes gleaming with calculated mischief as he outlines a plan to intercept Jack's communications details invented here to heighten the drama. Like falsified documents that could frame Jack for internal corruption, Carly, driven by her unyielding loyalty to family, buys into it, seeing only the payback she craves. But this feud isn't isolated. It's a live wire connected to Port Charles's underbelly, where old alliances fracture and new threats emerge from the ashes of past villains like Caesar Faison. At the heart of the paralyzed Jack's desperate race against time, far from the penthouse seclusion Carly imagines, He's embedded in a high-stakes WSB initiative targeting the insidious remnants of Faison's final, diabolical scheme. This isn't some low-level sting, it's a multinational effort to dismantle a network of rogue scientists and operatives think Britt Westburn's unresolved ties. The enigmatic Professor Dalton's forbidden research, the slippery Pascal's black market dealings, and Sidwell's ruthless funding streams all converging on a breakthrough in cold fusion technology. In the wrong hands, cold fusion isn't just an energy revolution. It's a weaponized apocalypse waiting to happen. Imagine portable reactors that could power cities or, more terrifyingly, detonate like dirty bombs, destabilizing economies, igniting wars, and rendering entire regions uninhabitable. Jack's team has traced these elements to hidden labs scattered from Eastern Europe to the docks of Port Charles, where shipments disguised as medical supplies hide fusion prototypes. His role: coordinating interdictions, decoding encrypted blueprints, and outmaneuvering assassins sent by this villainous cadre. Every late-night briefing, every narrow escape from a tailing operative underscores the mission's gravity failure means not just local chaos, but a chain reaction that could eclipse the Casadini family's infamous Ice Princess fiasco in scope and horror. Valentin's complicity adds layers of tragic irony to this unfolding drama. As a Casadini heir with his own brushes against WSB scrutiny, he possesses intimate knowledge of Pikeman's sprawling operations, a shadowy conglomerate that funnels resources into these fusion experiments, blending corporate espionage with outright terrorism. Pikeman's reach extends to manipulating Port Charles's elite, from bribing local officials to embedding spies in everyday businesses like the Metro Court. Valentin has crossed paths with this beast before, surviving assassination attempts and moral quandaries that left him wary. Yet, here he is, goading Carly into interference, perhaps driven by a twisted sense of poetic justice against Jack, his former confidant turned rival. Their history whispers of boardroom betrayals and midnight pacts gone wrong. Envision a young Valentin and Jack forging a fusion research deal under Faison's shadow, only for it to fracture when ethical lines blurred. Valentin's grudge blinds him to the bigger picture. By aiding Carly's sabotage, he's not just settling scores. He's handing ammunition to the very monsters Jack fights. Detailed analysis of his psyche reveals a man torn between redemption and resentment, where every calculated step with Carly risks reigniting the very inferno that once consumed his own empire. The brink of catastrophe, one false step away. The true danger crystallizes in how Carly and Valentin's machinations threaten to tip the scales. Carly perceives her partnership with Valentin as a savvy alliance with a known quantity the devil she can negotiate with, unlike Jack's elusive deceptions. She's meticulously planning her next strike, perhaps inventing a scenario where she poses as a disgruntled informant to feed false leads to Jack's superiors, eroding his credibility from within. In her view, this restores the control Jack stole when he involved Joss, teaching him that family decisions demand her input. But reality paints a grimmer portrait. Jack's operation tolerates zero distractions. A single leaked file or delayed extraction could allow the villains to activate a prototype, say, in a crowded international summit, unleashing radiation that knows no borders. Port Charles, with its history of cataclysms from chemical spills to alien ice, stands as ground zero. Imagine fusion experiments hidden in the catacombs beneath the city, vibrating with unstable energy as Carly's interference causes a vital ray to falter. This vendetta slices through a web of high-tension alliances, where Jack's removal wouldn't just orphan Joss's recruitment but empower a new Faison-like figurehead rising from the ashes. The villains, a motley crew of ex-WSB defectors and fusion zealots, salivate at the prospect of unchecked power. Their end game: harnessing cold fusion to blackmail nations, toppling governments, and reshaping the world order in their image. Carly's warpath, justified as it feels in her heart. Jack's lies about Joss's safety, his mishandling of their co-parenting dynamics, ignores these stakes. Each move she makes, from anonymous tips to Valentin-orchestrated diversions, buys the bad guy's precious time. If Jack stumbles because of this personal storm, the fallout cascades, Joss thrust deeper into danger without her father's guidance. Sunny Corinthos entangled in the crossfire. his own pikeman dealings scrutinized, and an entire town blindsided by a threat that starts in a lab but ends in global pandemonium. Reclaiming power or dooming the world. Ultimately, Carly's quest for retribution masks a profound miscalculation. She envisions toppling Jack as empowerment, a way to shield Joss from the shadows of espionage while mending her fractured pride. Yet, in tugging at these threads, she's fraying the very fabric holding chaos at bay. The Brennan-Casadini feud, once a tale of ambition and fallout, now endangers innocence caught in the blast radius from Willow's medical pursuits disrupted by radiation scares to Michael's business empire crumbling under economic shocks. Valentine, too, teeters on regret, his alliance with Carly a mirror to his past mistakes, where grudges overrode reason and left him isolated. As Port Charles braces for the fallout, one can't help but wonder if Carly will glimpse the abyss before it's too late. Her heart-driven fury, while compelling, risks igniting a fire that consumes everything she holds dear. In this delicate balance, the line between personal justice and planetary peril blurs, reminding us why these stories grip us. In the heat of betrayal, the smallest spark can light the end of days.
Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon. Bye.